Perfect. Okay, so let's get started. So just a little bit about Solar United Neighbors. We are a nonprofit organization, a 501c3 that is working to build a new energy system with rooftop solar at the cornerstone. Our mission is to help people go solar, join together, and fight for energy rights. And we do this through our solar co-op programs, which are essentially bulk purchasing programs for rooftop solar. And we'll talk about that throughout this presentation. Joining together through community building. We used to do a lot of in-person type events, and now we're doing a lot of virtual events, but just connecting neighbors who are kind of going through the process of going solar together. And then doing solar advocacy around issues that affect solar owners. So in Arizona, that largely means advocacy at the Arizona Corporation Commission, and we've been very involved in a set of energy rules that the commission is going to hear again tomorrow. So kind of looking at the clean energy future for Arizona and what that means for rooftop solar. We are in 12 states and Washington, D.C. We got started back in 2007 when a kid who is the kid of our now executive director, but he saw the film An Inconvenient Truth and was very motivated to come home and tell his mother that they had to go solar right away to help solve the climate crisis. And things kind of ballooned from there. They did a bunch of solar co-ops in neighborhoods in Washington, D.C., and we started to spread throughout the country. So far, the programs have been really successful. So we've done over 250 solar co-ops. We've helped over 5,000 households install solar through our process, which has been over 40 megawatts. And that's led to $103 million worth of rooftop solar purchases, $163 million in lifetime energy savings for the folks that bought those solar systems, and then over 1 billion pounds of lifetime carbon offsets. And we track all of this stuff so that we know our impacts for every impact for every co-op that we develop. Vincent and I are here tonight with you, and we have a whole set of other folks that work on our Arizona team. Overall, our organization has about 40 staff, half of which are in the States and half of which are national. And so if you're interested, maybe you've already signed up for the South Mountain Solar Co-op, but this is where you can go to sign up for the group. And we've got the sign up period is open through the end of this calendar year, and we'll talk about the process a little bit more throughout, but you can go to that website anytime. So we're gonna just run through solar technology, kind of like what's a solar panel, how does it work, how does it go in my house, how our solar co-ops work, and then more on solar economics, like what's it cost, how does it work on my electricity bill. So first part, solar technology. This is a diagram of basically how solar works on a typical residence. You first are going to install panels on the roof in a space that makes sense. We'll go over that here in a little bit. The solar panels produce direct current energy, or DC, and the appliances in your home use alternating current, or AC energy, so it has to go through an inverter, which is number 2 there. From there, it connects to your electrical panel in a simple connection, and then anytime the sun is shining, you're drawing energy straight from the solar panels as they're pumping out electricity. Anytime that the solar is creating more energy than you're using in your home, that goes back through your utility meter. And in Arizona, we actually have a second meter that will track your solar production that will get installed. And so that will go back onto the utility grid. You'll get a credit for that from the utility company, and the utility will sell that energy to your neighbors as it goes back into the system. A couple things we're going to talk about here. So just to level set on terminology. So kilowatts are a level of capacity. So the systems are measured in kilowatts size. And then electricity production is measured in kilowatt hours. So that's the amount of electricity that's being produced. It's also what's tracked on your utility bill every month. So how many kilowatt hours did you need to buy from the utility? Most homes are going to install anywhere between 2 and 12 kilowatts. I think the average size for the co-ops that we've done in Arizona has been around 7 kilowatts, and SRP systems are a little smaller, and we'll talk about why that is in a bit. So you're going to have to attach the solar to your roof, and the main way that this happens is through a racking system where panels are or beams are basically screwed into your roof. They're flashed into the shingles so that there's going to be no water that gets in underneath. Any reputable solar company is going to provide a labor warranty, which is going to cover the roof penetrations. And so if you get a leak within the warranty period, they'll come back out and fix it. And then the panels themselves are attached to racks like you see here, that are the beams basically that you see here, and they're wired together from that point forward. If you don't have a sort of a typical roof, and I will say, a lot of folks in Arizona have the kind of Spanish tile roofs, and it's a similar flashing system with beams. There, they'll take off of the existing tiles and sort of put the racks there, and sometimes they'll, depending on the roof, they'll leave the tiles off under the panels, or sometimes they'll be able to put them back under. It kind of depends on the setup, and that's something you talk to the installer about. If you have a flat roof, there's a couple of options. You can ballast the panels and basically weigh them down, or you can use pitch pockets there in the bottom right, which is basically a system to kind of angle the panels in the right way from a flat roof. If you have a standing metal seam roof, you can just clamp the panels to the seam, and then sometimes older buildings have parapet walls, and you can install the solar on beams from there. Big takeaway here is there's basically there's a racking solution for any type of roof, and you just got to talk to the installer about what makes sense for your property. Some folks in more rural areas are doing ground mounted systems. So we have a co-op right now. I don't know if anyone has ever been to Portal, Arizona, but it's kind of this far-flung place, southeastern Arizona, where we've got a co-op with 32 folks out there, and probably half of them are going to do ground mounted systems just because they have the space. And so that's an option for some folks, but mostly in the city, we're going to do rooftop. So as far as what makes a good site for solar, south facing is best, and then west facing is second best. And that's because it's going to track with the sun's production, and then also with how you use energy at home. So, most of us are using more energy kind of in the late afternoon, early evening period. And if you're able to get more of that from solar, you're going to save more money. You want to make sure that there's not going to be a big tree that's shading your roof for most of the day where you put the solar, because that's just going to take a hit on your production. So trimming a tree may be an option if that's something that you have to think about. And then just having enough space to mount the solar panels, and that's something in the design phase with the installer that you'll be able to work through. I want to talk a little bit about what happens when the power goes out and some of the technology associated with that. So when there is an outage, like a monsoon storm or something like that, solar does shut off. The inverters are built to sort of shut the production down, and that's so that utility line workers are safe, and that there's not a lot of extra energy going back into the grid when they're fixing whatever problem has occurred. So if you do want backup power during an outage, you need to install a battery storage system. And I want to spend just a minute talking about battery storage, because the technology has come a long way, and there are a lot of options and actually incentives that are available right now, especially for SRP customers. So you may want to get storage if you have frequent outages, if you have critical loads at home that you're worried about not being able to use, like a CPAP machine or something else. Just being prepared. And then what folks are using battery storage now, in addition to kind of just having backup power, is to offset peak energy charges. And I'll talk a little bit more about kind of how that works, but essentially you can bank solar during the day and then use it when the sun goes down, but when you would otherwise still be paying the utility a premium charge. And so you can kind of save even more that way. And then SRP does have an incentive program for battery storage right now that's it's actually pretty good. So you can take advantage of that. A couple different types of batteries. So there's the kind of old school lead acid batteries, but most people are not using these now in home setups. Most people are using the lithium ion batteries, which here is an LG Chem system. You maybe have heard of the Tesla Powerwall is a popular product. And these are smart systems that you can program to take in solar energy during certain times of day and discharge energy back into your home at other times of day. And kind of long term, and something we're talking about in the overall sort of rules and policy of the state, is that utilities may use home-sited battery storage as virtual power plants in the future and be able to credit you as someone that has a battery system for energy that the utility may take at peak periods. So like the really hottest days of the year, they could draw from thousands of distributed battery systems and not have to have that really expensive and dirty gas power plant that they have to turn on at that point. So those kind of systems and policies are still being developed, but it's something that that is possible and something that actually happened in California during their recent electricity crisis. We've got a battery storage guide that's pretty comprehensive on our website, and so you can, if you're interested in storage, you can go there to learn more. A lot of folks that go solar are also interested in electric vehicles. Obviously another clean technology and something that really pairs well with solar. So you can literally charge your car with sunshine. And we will ask installers for pricing on electric vehicle chargers. It's called a level 2 charger, which will charge your car a little bit faster than just kind of plugging it into a normal plug. So this is a level 2, you need a 240 volt outlet. So some installers will give us pricing on what it costs to install the outlet. Some will actually provide us pricing on the level 2 units themselves. But this will help you charge the EV more like 10 to 30 miles an hour. It sort of depends on the vehicle. And it'll come with a short warranty. And these are just some rough numbers on how many miles you drive per year that you're going to want charged, how much extra solar you should plan to add to your system to make up for that if you don't have an EV, if you're planning to charge with an EV. So not just based on your home electricity use now. Okay, so we're going to go to how solar co-ops work, unless, Vincent, there's a question you think I should address before I go
on. Ian wrote if a group of neighbors could pool their resources for a battery system and share the power generation. And my thought about that would be no.
Yeah, that's a great question, Ian, and something that we should think about as we go forward and talking to utilities like SRP as they do their kind of grid planning, because it could make sense to have a community-sited battery project. But at this point, there aren't really kind of the rules of the road for that to happen, and it would probably be like a utility-owned battery, and then who would get the credits for it, and you'd need like a third-party developer to come in and do a shared storage storage system. The other way that folks are thinking about kind of community sited storage are things like community resilience hubs, where it would be, maybe like a school or a local community center that has solar and is powered by storage, and it's a place kind of like of refuge if there's like an event where power goes out, or maybe it's a place where lower income customers can go to get cool in the summer or something like that. So anyway, I'm getting a little bit off on a tangent, but it's an interesting idea that's probably just not possible right now. Excuse me. Okay, cool. So let's talk about co-ops. So what's a solar co-op? It's a group of homeowners in a defined area. So we've defined this co-op after kind of talking with Ian about where he lives and where he's been doing outreach. We decided to call it the South Mountain Solar Co-op, since he's been reaching out to folks kind of in that part of South Phoenix. And then we've decided to allow people kind of all around the mountain. So from Laveen over to Ahwatukee and even South Tempe to sign up. And, to be honest, like there's probably a 10 to 20 mile radius within the city that we would just allow people to join. And so feel free to share it with others that you know. We will run an installer bidding process where we will, at some point when we've reached critical mass, which is typically 20 to 30 people signing up for the co-op, that will issue a request for proposal or an RFP to installers in the area. And then they will send us a bid back to say, here's my pricing for solar for a group of that size. Here's the equipment that I'll offer. I'm going to throw in this extra warranty in hopes that I'll win the bid, things like that. And then we bring all the bids to the group, and the group deliberates, and we have a selection committee meeting, and you all as co-op members will pick which installer to go with based on the bids that we were able to get. So, we provide as much information as we can, but we're installer neutral, and we strive to be, helpful, but not to push you one way or the other. And then everyone will be individually contacted by the chosen company. They'll provide you a bid that is based on the pricing that they provided to us. And then at that point, you can decide whether you want to go solar or not. So it's free to join the co-op, and the installer will pay us a fee per signed contract that we ask them to build into their group pricing. So, and that fee is $600. But again, no obligation to go solar through this process. You can just sign up to get information, come to things like this to learn more, get contacted by the installer, get a proposal in hand, and decide if it's something you want to go ahead with. And if it's not, no sweat. You can decide it's not right for you at this time. There's no pressure. And then we're here for you if you need support. So you don't understand something about the bid, you're having trouble getting in touch with the installer, or you think they're telling you something that's kind of weird. Vincent and I are your experts in the field and are here to kind of help you through this process. And then we want to be able to connect folks with everyone that's, part of the co-op. So we've been trying to do like virtual happy hours, and we have a Facebook group, and just ways to kind of keep people connected. So just an example from this summer, we had a really gangbusters co-op in Tucson, where in 2 months we had 167 households sign up. We had a bunch of local partner organizations you can see here, and we got a good story in the Tucson newspaper that really helped to get people to sign up. And then of those 167, 62 of them signed a contract, and they're moving ahead to go solar. And we're going to install just over 440 kilowatts of solar through that group. So that's quite a bit and pretty exciting. So we'll send out some materials that, and I think I already have actually shared this with Ian, so maybe you've seen this, but this is just the basic process that I went through. So learning about the co-op, signing up, going through the installer selection process, the installer will then contact folks individually, provide proposals based on the group pricing, and then you can decide whether to sign a contract and move ahead with an install. So we're definitely in the early phases of this, and really would be helpful to share it with others at this point to help to grow the group, because the more folks that we have at the beginning, to show installers that there's a sizable group that's interested, the better pricing that we'll be able to bring back. So in thinking about this particular group, we've set a few goals and deadlines up front. So we're trying to get to at least 40 households. I think we have 6 or 7 so far. And then we'll run the bidding process in November and have the group select an installer in early December. Definitely want to do it before the holidays and folks get busy. And then the sign up deadline will be the end of the year, and folks will get installed in early 2021. So again, that's the website to share this group. And then just to reiterate a few things, so co-op members are the ones that pick the installer in this process. And then we're going to look at a whole set of criteria, including price, the equipment. They send us the spec sheets for all the equipment that they're using, and we check that out. Warranties. And then some people are interested in, is this is this a local company that knows the area? They're not just parachuting in from Texas or California trying to win this bid, but they actually know the market and know the housing stock. And then experience, are they a brand new company? Have they been around for 10 years? And then I mentioned that the installer will pay us a $600 fee per signed contract to help us run this process. And we ask that they build that into their discounted group pricing. So I have to mention this, we're in the middle of a pandemic, obviously, and we have made some changes. So all of the Solar United Neighbors programming was moved online in March and continues to be virtual. You can, purchase and install solar with little to no contact. Installers will do virtual visits with you. They can examine your electricity bill. We do satellite reviews of roofs up front. And then, they'll obviously need to come to your home to look, but usually it's just looking at your roof from the outside, looking at your electricity box, and then the installation crew will be on the roof. But throughout the process, and when things have been shut down, solar installers in Arizona have been allowed to operate. And then we will ask installers kind of about their social distancing processes and what they're doing. Pretty much everybody has a process at this point. So we'll share that with the group when it comes to the selection time. And then was there another question, Vincent?
There was. So the question is, how many bids do we typically get? And going into the process, is it possible to have any idea of how much we may be able to reduce our individual costs by participating? So number of bids and amount of savings.
Yeah, those are really good questions. So the bids vary by co-op. If we have enough folks in them, I mean, we've been averaging 4 to 5 bids per co-op. So I would say anywhere from 3 to 6 bids that we'll get in for this group. And then going into the process, I would say sometimes people will contact installers individually and ask them for a proposal outside of the co-op. And then you could compare that with what we would get on the group pricing, and you can then see what the difference would be. If you participate in the selection committee process, you'll be able to compare. We try to make the comparison as apples to apples as possible in our bid review, and so you can see the differences at least provided in the group bid. But I would suggest if you really want to compare kind of going as an individual versus going through the co-op to just individually reach out to a couple of companies and get a bid that way. And that way you can see some people do that. And honestly, we encourage it. Like if that's what you want to do, then it's extra work for you, but it's more information. Ian, since you have the ability to talk, did that cover your question?
Yeah, I was just typing in one more to ask, at what point in the process do people who've expressed interest in the co-op typically commit to doing that? Is it basically once we have the offers and can see whether, we think it's a good thing to do?
Yeah, exactly. I'm just going to run back to this slide. So yeah, there's basically no commitment when you sign up other than raising your hand and saying, I'm fairly interested in this and I want to be a part of the group to see if it may work for me. And then when the installer contacts you and hands you a proposal and says, okay, based on your budget and your energy needs and the pricing, here's what a system is going to cost you. And at that point, you can decide to write them a check and sign a contract, or you can decide to walk away.
Okay, that's clear. Thanks.
Yep. All right, all really good questions. I'm going to move on and get through economics. So this actually speaks a little bit to the question about pricing in the co-op. So this is a chart that shows average price of solar from 2010 in the blue, and then our average co-op pricing in the yellow. And this only goes up to 2018, but on average, our co-ops are like 15 to 20% below market because of the group dynamic. And then there is a tax credit, couple of incentive things at play here, and the major one is the federal solar tax credit. Excuse me. So that is set to go down from 26% if you were to be fully installed this year, which this group is just too late for that. But next year, it's still worth 22% of the cost of the system. And so you can write this off of your federal income tax liability. And if you don't have that much federal income tax in 1 year, you can roll it over up to 5 years. Don't know what just happened there. Sorry. I think I turned the captions on myself, so I'm going to start over at this slide. There we go. So there is a big incentive actually to go solar next year, unless and this is always a big if Congress extends the tax credit next year, then beyond that there would be something available. This tax credit has been on the books for a long time. It was at 30% for a long time. It was extended 5 or 6 years ago, and then it has declined to this point. And so in 2022, if there's no action taken, it'll go down to 0 for residential systems. Arizona has some tax incentives as well. So there's a 25% state tax credit worth up to $1,000. So for most people, that just means $1,000 off the system, off of your state income tax. There's also a property tax exemption for solar in Arizona. So if adding solar is an upgrade to your home, but the county assessor will not increase your tax liability based on adding solar. And then there's a sales tax exemption as well. So there won't be, excuse me, sales tax on the proposal. And then SRP since most of this area is served by SRP, we have a lot of SRP specific info in the next few slides. So there's a battery storage incentive that's worth up to $3,600. It's based on the size of the battery, so it's $300 per kilowatt of capacity installed. So essentially you can go up to 12 kilowatts of capacity, a 12 kilowatt battery, and you can still get a $3,600 rebate from SRP. And then they also have a rebate for demand controllers. And I'll briefly talk about demand controllers and what those are and why they're important here in a minute. There's not any direct solar incentives from SRP, just around these sort of additional technologies. You can't have a solar webinar without talking about net metering. So we're going to talk a little bit about net metering, and it's a term that gets thrown around. And if you're not involved in solar, you may not know what it is. So I'm just going to explain it as best I can. Essentially, you track the flow of energy to and from the utility. So that diagram I showed you at the beginning, when your solar is producing more than you need, it's sending power back to the utility. So the utility is tracking how much they get from you. And then the utility is also tracking how much you get from them, because you're going to need energy when the sun goes down and your panels aren't producing. And so when you send that excess energy, you're credited for what you would have paid for energy during that time. That's the basic premise of net metering. There's a one-to-one exchange for, I give you some energy, I need some energy. We're going to we'll look at the balance of that and see what the net is at the end of the month. And some net metering programs used to kind of roll over credits month to month, and then you'd look at the net at the end of the year. SRP only does this now on every month, and sort of looks at what the net is per month, and does not roll over monthly to have an annual net. So if you go solar with SRP, you're going to have 4 different rate plans that you'll be offered by the company. All of them are on a time of use plan, which means that energy is more expensive during early to late afternoon and early evening in the summer. And then in the winter, it's more expensive in the morning and then in the evening. There's the total, if you have a solar, is going to be $32 a month fixed fee. Right now, the fixed fee for non-solar customers for SRP is around $20 a month, and they've added a $12 a month charge for solar customers. 2 of the plans, I'm just kind of generalizing how the plans look, and I have another slide that goes into more detail, but it's a lot of information, and I'm happy to answer some questions about it as we go through this, but I don't want to overwhelm anyone. But essentially 2 of the plans are net metering plans. So what I just talked about, you get that one-to-one exchange for the energy, but they have a demand charge associated with it. And a demand charge is essentially looks at how much power you're using during a 30-minute window during those expensive peak hours. And there's a premium charge based on how much you're using all at once. But most people, even with that demand charge, are still choosing E27, which is a net metering plan with a demand charge. They now offer a couple other plans that do not have a demand charge, but they also do not have net metering. And so the excess solar is then credited at a lower rate. So you're not getting very much for the extra solar you send back to SRP. And this looks at the differences between the plans. And again, this is complex and happy to answer any questions. A lot of people still choose this E27 plan on the left. So you'll notice all of them have the $32 a month fixed fee that you can't get around. The energy from SRP costs 4 to 6 cents from the E27 plan, depending on the time of day and the time of year. that also means that you're going to get credited 4 to 6 cents for any extra energy you send to SRP at those times. But you have to deal with the demand charge. And so the demand charge is the 30 minutes during these on-peak hours that you're using the most power during the month. There's going to be a fee associated with that. And then on the other side, these plans that don't have a demand charge, you're only getting 2.8 cents back for any extra solar you send to SRP. So over here, you're getting 4 to 6 cents back from SRP. You're only getting 2.8 cents back. And that's their calculation based on what they would have had to pay if they bought solar from a utility scale solar farm. We have a lot of issues with how they make that calculation and that valuation, but that's the policy that's on the books today. I'm going to break this down a little bit, so hopefully it's a little more usable. And again, happy to answer any questions, but essentially how you want to think about saving money on your utility bill with solar, if you have SRP, is to offset as much of your energy use in real time with solar as you can. So lining up how you're using power during sort of daylight, sunny hours, and soaking as much of that in to use as possible is important, because that also limits your demand during these peak hours when you would get hit with a high demand charge if you're using a lot of appliances at once. So you need to kind of make some behavioral shifts to not run the washing machine and run the dryer and run the dishwasher all during this 2 to 8 p.m. period in the summer, because you'll be hit with a really high fee. You got to spread that out to over the weekend or different hours. And then if you offset what you do use with solar, then you can really end up saving. Another piece of advice that we've learned is just not to buy too large of a system if you have SRP, because if you have a large system, you're going to have a lot of extra energy that is going back to SRP. And as you saw from the previous slide, you're just not getting a lot back from them for that extra power you're generating. And so it's going to take you a long time to pay off the system, because a larger system is more expensive. And so it's just going to take more time to pay that off. And so what a lot of folks are doing is sizing their system to something like 75% of their annual consumption. And that tends to be a decent way to thread the needle on not spending too much on a large system, but having enough to cover your energy needs during the day. So mention some of the technology that can help overcome the rate structures that SRP has put in place. So one is a demand controller, or it's also known as a load controller. And so this is kind of a new technology that is basically cruise control for your energy demand. So you'll have it installed, you can dial it up and say, I never want to go over 3 kilowatts or 4 kilowatts of demand, because then you will know exactly, you can kind of cap yourself on what you're going to have to pay for that demand fee every month. And if you do go over, you can program your circuits to shut off in a priority setting, so that if you're drawing too much power for one thing, for example, a good example of this is if you have an electric water heater, you don't have to heat your water at all times of day. If that thing were to turn on during those peak hours, it can kick that off. And you should probably just set it to not go off during those hours anyway, but that's just one example. There is a $250 rebate from SRP if you get a load controller, but they do cost $2,000 to $2,500 upfront. That's at least what we've seen in bids. And then battery storage is another way to get around the demand charges and to offset some of these fees. So instead of sending energy back to SRP that they would only pay you a small amount for, you could store that energy in a battery and then use it when the sun goes down from sort of 6 to 8 p.m. when you would still have to pay a premium charge, or in the winter months, peak hours are 5 a.m. to 5 a.m. and before the sun comes up, so you could draw from the battery during those times to avoid peak charges. But batteries are expensive too. So, 10 kilowatt battery is probably $10,000, but the SRP $3,600 rebate helps with that, and you can use some of the solar tax incentives with that as well. And then this is just a diagram of kind of how that looks with a battery system. So you can shave off, lower the amount that you're needing from the utility, which will lower your overall costs during peak hours. So again, we're getting in the weeds here. SRP kind of has forced us to get into the weeds on demand and on some of these kind of really technical issues. And so I just bring this up as for any wonky people that want to sort of get into this. I'm happy to do that. And I see we have some questions coming in. I'm just going to finish up here with what this looks like on a real bill and what you could, how you can sort of think about it. And then we can get to some of the questions before we wrap up. But so this is just on the E27 plan, for example. So this plan has net metering still, and then there's a demand charge. So let's say, and I just pulled these numbers from a utility bill I was reviewing the other day from someone in the month of September. So this person used 200 kilowatt hours of on-peak energy from their utility in the month. And then they generated 50 kilowatt hours of energy on peak. And so their net was that they needed 150 kilowatt hours from the utility. And then they, the cost in September for SRP for on-peak energy is 4.6 cents, which is pretty cheap. So the energy charge for on-peak here is $6.93. This person used 500 kilowatt hours off peak, and they generated 400 kilowatt hours off peak. And so they needed a net of 100 kilowatt hours from the utility. They should say kilowatt hours, excuse me, they say kilowatts. But they needed 100 kilowatt hours at 3.6 cents. And so their off peak energy charge is $3.06. So energy is pretty cheap from SRP, but the way that they recoup their expenses is through the high fixed fee and the demand charge. So this person's bill would look like this, where they would be paying roughly $10 for energy charges because they use less energy because they were using energy straight from their solar, and then they were able to reduce their net by generating electricity to offset. But then they did have a 3 kilowatt demand. So their max was, they were drawing 3 kilowatts during 30 minutes of their peak usage. And then that fee is a multiplier. So it's up to 3 kilowatts, it's $7.89 per kilowatt. So the demand charge here is $23.67. And then you've got that $32 a month fixed charge. So the bill ends up for this month for this person being $66.44, and that's before a couple bucks of city and county tax that I didn't take the time to calculate. So I hope that's a helpful kind of real world example for SRP, because these rates are fairly complicated. We did game out sort of sample cash purchase and what this would look like. So and so this is a 4 kilowatt system or an 8 kilowatt system. So sort of a smaller system and then a medium to large system. We price this at $3 a watt, which is probably over the market. We're probably, our bids are often around $2.50 a watt. I think you could see $2.75 a watt easily on your own. So this is a conservative estimate. But just going with this, with the 22% federal tax credit next year, the state tax credit, you'd be paying something like $8,300 to close to $18,000 if you had a bigger system. And then based on these rates from SRP, we've looked at how much you would be saving cumulatively over time. And in some cases it's not much. I think this is a range based on the different rate plans. So we looked at those. The rate plan without net metering is a lot worse than the rate plan even with the demand charge. You're going to be better off dealing with, if you can handle the demand charge, you can save money long term with solar with SRP if you don't buy too big of a system. Okay, so let me stop here. Actually, let me just get through this and then we can, I literally have just like 3 slides left. So next steps are to sign up for the co-op. There's the website. Ian's been sharing it around. This is our Facebook group, so you can just Google us, Solar United Neighbors of Arizona, and you just have to request to join. And then if anyone knows of an installer that would want to bid on this project, or if you happen to work for a solar company, you can sign up for our RFPs here, and then you can bid on the projects. And that is it. So let's go back and see what other questions that we have, and folks feel free to ask any additional questions at this time. So thank you.
So we do have one, we have a few. The first one is, do all installers have similar technology?
Do you want to answer that, Vincent?
Sure. I would say that broadly speaking, we see the same brands over and over again for modules, racking, battery systems, EV chargers. However, they may offer them at different price points. But more or less, we do see the same brands over and over. But it's not just a question of, technology. There are also other factors in the RFP that we like to consider that could, sway the selection committee to one company versus another. The next question is, so Ian wrote, so with SRP, if we were to buy solar and continue with our current daily energy usage patterns, is it possible that we could end up paying more on our electricity bills with solar than we currently pay without? In other words, do we have to change our behavior and use less during certain hours to achieve savings?
I would say that that's true. It depends what rate plan you're on right now. But the conventional wisdom is that the E27 plan that has a demand charge is the most economic plan for most solar customers, but it comes with a risk of you need to be careful about using energy during those peak hours, because SRP will charge you a high fee if you screw it up. And so I think it's important to at least pair going solar with having a functional smart thermostat, or at least a programmable thermostat that you can make sure that you're that you're controlling your energy usage during those peak hours during the different times of year, and monitor it going forward. I mean, that's the trick with the SRP rate structure, is that they they don't give you a lot back for the extra solar that you create. The power is pretty cheap from them, so the power you're offsetting with solar is relatively cheap, and they're recouping their expenses through fixed fees like the demand fee and like the high monthly charge. And so the game for folks that go solar is to not pay too much for a large solar array and really match it to your usage, and then to really pay attention of your usage during those peak periods.
Next question is, how long does it typically take to recover the cost?
Yeah, so let me bring that slide back up. So this is, and again, this is based on a price per watt that we should probably adjust this chart at some point soon, because we've seen pricing that's lower than this in pretty much all of our bids. But it's a conservative estimate of $3 a watt. We're probably going to have something more like 270 a watt or even 250 a watt has been bid. So the cost is going to be less for co-op pricing here, most likely. But over time, we're modeling out that on average, it probably takes like 12 to 15 years to pay off the system under the current SRP rates.
Do any homes go off grid and only use solar and battery?
That is rare. So you would need a substantial amount of batteries, most likely, to be able to pull that off. Air conditioning units need a lot of power, and so you would really need to match that with a substantial amount of batteries. And just being in the city with easy utility connections, it's my understanding that it's somewhat difficult to disconnect. We see more off-grid type systems in more rural areas where there just maybe isn't a utility connection, or it just makes sense for their property to be off-grid.
And then the last question is it typical for solar users to not need to draw any electricity from SRP? We had it in Santa Fe for 4 years and only drew from the company there once in a very hot month. We were always able to produce what we needed with solar. So I would just say about that, you're going to be, if you don't have a battery, you're going to be drawing from the grid technically every night. But you may have such good production from the array that you're not drawing any more energy than you've already accrued as a balance. But because you are still interconnected to the grid, you are drawing from the grid on a daily basis, and then it just depends on, at the end of the month, if your system has produced more or less than you've used.
Yeah, and you'll see, like in the shoulder months, especially, where on my example here of this person needed to pay around $10 for energy usage because they netted that they needed energy from the utility. But in Arizona, as we all know, typically in months like October or November, where we don't have to run the AC as much, especially at night, and the solar, it's a little cool during the day, and the solar is running really efficiently and producing a lot, SRP will actually give you a credit on your bill. So if you're generating more than you're using, they'll pay you, and that will reduce your fixed costs that you would have to pay them from a demand charge or from a fixed fee.
Finally, it says, what are SRP's sources of generation? Like, where does their electricity come from? What kind of sources?
Oh, that's such a good question. Ian, you should know the answer to this. I can try to pull it up, but I wonder if you're asking for the benefit of the group or if you're actually asking.
Yeah, I'm not super knowledgeable about it, except that I understand they do use some hydropower, and I'm guessing they have natural gas plants that they use for peak hours.
Yeah, I think that that's right. They have a lot of hydro. They yeah, they don't, and then they historically have had a lot of coal, but they're getting away from coal, and they've just last year they were the first utility in Arizona to make carbon emission reduction targets, and so I think they're aiming for 62% carbon reduction by 2035 and 95% carbon reductions by 2050. And I would anticipate that they'll be out of the coal business by 2032, which is similar projection to most of the other utilities at this point.
According to their website, in terms of their renewable energy portfolio, which they include in that biomass, solar, wind, geothermal, and hydropower. Hydropower is the biggest share of that portfolio, but solar is right there with it at about 80% of the total of hydropower. And then it goes down to geothermal, wind, and biomass.
Thanks. And just referring to Delisa's comment, it seems like SRP has a pretty different rate structure than what she had in Santa Fe, where for a good part of the year, they weren't paying much of a bill, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I think we had to pay, I think it was a very minimal charge every month to the utility there, like $11. And then I think 1 month out of the whole 4 years, we had to pay maybe $20 extra because it was just really hot that month. And I had a lot of guests, so we used a lot.
And that's the benefit of the old way of the net metering structure. So now if you have extra energy from SRP, they'll credit you for that extra energy in that month. But in the past with full-on net metering, you kind of, it's like rollover minutes on a cell phone bill where it'll just add up and add up. And so then you'll be just paying the minimum amount every month. And then at the end of the year, there's a thing called a true up where you'll kind of look and see, and you may owe them a little bit more, they may owe you a little bit more, but those credits will really help you get through some of the warmer months with not having a high bill, depending when that true up takes place. But unfortunately, we just don't have that system anymore. So thank you all for being here. And we're going to try to, Ian, maybe I'll touch base with you about this, but we could try to hold another one of these in 2 or 3 weeks. And if we have some new people that are interested in the co-op, we could have them join. We tend to find that these are helpful, obviously to just give people information, but then also helpful to grow the co-op. So would encourage everyone to share the information, and thanks again for taking an hour with us on your Wednesday night.